Part 2 of the story Toy Town. That night, while Mrs. Meard was saying goodnight to Johnny, he was fighting the feeling to talk to his mom and ask her more questions about the cottage down the street. It had become the focus of the whole town. In a small town, it didn't take much to give people something to fixate and obsess about. It was as if she could read his mind. She spoke first. "Johnny, remember the story about the house down the road from us, the little toy workshop I told you about last night, honey?" Johnny answered, "Yes," but he tried to act as if it really didn't matter. "Well," she continued bravely, "soon we will be able to see what's inside there. Yeah, they mentioned that in the morning announcements at school. Well, well, good, honey. I just don't want you I just want you to know that the tour may not be as great as everyone is anticipating." He gave his mother a confused look. She knew she needed to explain more. "You see, the younger man, the man who took over the running of the shop, he didn't really succeed, Johnny. I don't want you to be disappointed. The whole reason behind the whole tour and hype is just to raise money to try and build a factory and make that little shack into a larger, more attractive, money-making toy shop. That's it. That is all. And do you know how much money it would take to build a factory? Lots?" She smiled, brushing her fingers through her son's hair, and answered, "A lot more than lots. A whole lot more than lots." Just after she kissed him and turned off his light, Johnny had to ask, "So, Mom," she turned to look in from the door she would leave open just a crack. "Mom, so you think even the money from a tour, that cottage won't be anything more?" She replied, "I'm afraid not, son. Get some sleep." She walked away, feeling disheartened that she had ever told him even a little bit about that house and its history. Johnny called loudly, "Mom! Mom! Mom, can you come in here?" She came back in, saying, "I left the door open a crack. What's wrong?" He just had to ask, "Mom, did you know the young man that took over?" She just said, "Another night, son. Another night." "But, Mom," he insisted, "did you know him? Did he know Daddy?" She softly said, "Yes, son, I knew him." Johnny felt like he was making progress. "Did Daddy know him?" She paused, then said, "It's complicated. Your father, Daddy, was very fond of him, too." Johnny's thoughts raced, and his curiosity got the best of him. He asked, "Mom, was Daddy, you know, did Daddy like other men instead of ladies, women like you? Was the man that took over a gay guy and Daddy ran off with him?" Mrs. Mayer just laughed. She was shocked that her little boy would go down that road and with that train of thought. She gathered herself and said, "Son, let's just say that he was very fond of himself. But let me ask you, son, where did you hear about people being gay?" She began to tickle him, trying to keep him young and innocent from adult complications just a little longer. Now the tables were turned. Johnny laughed, then was silent. No more questions would be asked that night. "Good night, son." She walked away, shaking her head. She looked back through the cracked door. "Your daddy left me because he loved his work and himself more than me." As she walked down the hall, she heard he heard her say, "Oh, and as for oh, and as far as I know, the young man that took over the workshop, he's not gay. I'm not even sure if anyone lives in that cottage. The roof leaks." Once his mom was out of earshot, he set his alarm for 1:50 a.m., although he knew he wasn't going to be able to sleep until after his attempt to see what was in that small, dark, mysterious cottage. He was hoping his mom was right and that no one lived there. The hour had come, and Johnny, for the first time ever, snuck out in a race to meet the other boys. On the way, he tried to hide in the shadows. His biggest fear was that the others wouldn't show up, and that this was one big joke on him, the underdog that was constantly rejected by his peers. The small group of 5 boys could be heard breathing heavy and shushing each other. They were making more noise just by trying to keep each other quiet. Johnny was relieved to see them there. He felt like he wasn't so alone. All of them were just as wide-eyed and nervous as he was. Nick asked the older boy, "So, what's the plan, Phil?" This was the first time Johnny learned any of their names other than Nick, who he already knew a little. Phil looked at Johnny and asked, "Yeah, what's the plan, Johnny?" Johnny realized he was in charge now. "Well, you guys ever done anything like this before?" They all hummed and hawed, acting as if it was nothing new. Johnny laughed out loud and said, "You guys haven't done anything." "Shh!" the smallest boy demanded. "I'm sorry, guys, but I thought you were all big time," Johnny chuckled. He gloated in the fact that they were kids just like him. They just acted like they were bigger and better, and had the confidence that Johnny lacked up until this moment. "Okay, boys," Johnny began. "You gotta listen to me and do everything I say, and don't do anything I say not to do." He had the boys in the palm of his hands. He whispered but spoke forcefully. "Now, first, we got to know what to call each other, but not use our real names. You know, in case someone hears us. And don't call me Johnny. I'm not gonna have people knowing that I was involved in this break-in." When Johnny used the word break-in, the weight and severity of this sneaking about hit all of the boys. They all nodded, giving Johnny their full attention. Nick asked, "But what names?" Johnny hushed him. "Shh! Shush! I'll tell you what names. Call me Panther." Johnny kind of thought he'd enjoy this strange way of meeting new friends. He figured he'd make up names that would be considered degrading, and this gave him the revenge of all those times he endured name-calling. He assigned names like Stubby, Dirty, Rockhead, Big Lip, and his favorite, Ducky. They huddled up and Johnny made a scheme. On Johnny's command, the boys ran, hunched over, and snuck to the bushes on the cottage grounds. Johnny then whispered more instructions. The boys did just as he said, and they moved as brisk but as low to the ground as possible. Phil even crawled on the ground. Johnny had the boys surround the workshed. Each boy was to look into a window assigned to them and see if any were open. If they could see anything inside, he told them to make a mental picture and report back to him later. He also told them if the windows was open or if they found a door to not go in. Some of the boys were lying on the ground looking in the basement windows. Middle school rumors said that rats slid down the stair railings. The boys looking in the side windows had hoped to see something like that. As Nick looked into one of the back windows, he found himself stepping in something soft and mushy. Phil noticed how the street lights casting on the house revealed cracked paint, how dirty the windows were, and how the place was falling apart. Johnny himself took the boldest position and went right up onto the front porch. This made him look like the hero and the bravest of them all. Johnny realized that he was the only one who wouldn't be accused of peeking in windows, breaching privacy. If caught, he would be able to say he was just knocking to see if anyone was home. There's no law against that, he thought as he smiled, standing in front of the old paint-chipped door. This was the closest anyone had been to this legendary house. Johnny reached out his hand, made a fist, looked around, and knocked loud and hard 3 times. Just after he knocked, the boys let out a terrifying scream in unison and ran all the way back to the bushes across the street. Once behind the bushes, none of them could talk because they were so afraid and out of breath. Phil got the first words out. That was nuts! The boy Johnny nicknamed Ducky agreed and asked, Yeah, hey, who knocked? They saw Johnny was standing on the front porch across the street, waving and smiling at them. He wasn't shaken up at all. Rockhead said, Johnny, you're nuts! You've sure got guts, man. Again, Johnny smiled and slowly walked across the street to join his new friends. Nick said, I heard pounding before the knock. Ducky said, Yeah. I heard some thuds coming from the basement. The boy nicknamed Dirty said, I couldn't see a thing through the windows. They were so dirty, but I heard that hammering and pounding too. But when Johnny knocked, the face of this bear popped up in the window I was looking in. All the boys started talking at once, yelling, telling each other what they saw. A big bear's head, a man's body with no head, some kind of hairy creature, a spooky messed up clown face, a lady with no eyes. Johnny wasn't sure if they had really seen anything, or if each of them were just letting their imaginations run away with them. Well, guys, Johnny said, now we have something to tell others. Johnny turned to walk home. Where are you going? He heard one of the boys cry in desperation. Johnny smiled before turning around, thinking how the tables have turned, and now how he was the boy on the top of the totem pole now. He knew that tomorrow he'd be the top boy on the monkey bars. He said with confidence, I'm going home, and you guys better too. Who knows? He may be watching. His voice sent a shiver through the night air. They all looked at each other with the same fear. He may be right. They all nodded and went their different ways. Johnny never slept better. The next morning, Johnny raced downstairs to greet his mother. She seemed serious, and Johnny thought for sure that somehow she found that he snuck out last night. He was ready for the I'm so disappointed in you speech. Instead, she handed him an envelope, simply saying, Here. Johnny slowly opened the envelope as he looked at his mom. It was 2 invitations to attend the opening day tour of the toy shop on 13th Street and Dice Avenue. Johnny was stunned. An awkward silence came between him and his mother. She broke the ice. It's for you and one of your friends. Why not you and me? His mom had a small tear in her eye. Johnny thought it could have been because she was happy for him. He repeated the question, Mom, why me and a friend? Why not you? Go with me. His mom smiled a little and replied, Because I think it would be good for you to make more friends and take someone, even a girl if you want. It could be a good opportunity for you to make some new friends. Wow. 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 Thank you. Oh, my lands. Johnny looked at the invitation. He couldn't believe it was in his hands. He wondered how she got it and how much it cost. He read every word and noticed on the back, stamped in red, was the words complimentary. He had no idea what that meant. The envelope looked old, and he noticed the invitations were brittle and kind of dusty, too. Johnny, his mother interrupted his train of thought. Don't be too disappointed. Disappointed? Johnny thought, but before he could ask why she would even say that, she went on. I'd also prefer you to take a friend rather than me because, Johnny, I just don't think it's going to be that great of a tour, but who knows? You can't judge a book by its cover, huh? She tried to cheer Johnny up. Johnny, having seen the outside up close, knew that what was on the inside had to be far more interesting. His face lit up. Mom, don't worry about that. It's going to be so cool to be one of the few to be welcomed in, just to see what's in there. I hope this didn't cost you too much, Mom. She just mumbled in passing, a friend of a family member of ours who we haven't seen for some time, someone who worked in the toy shop or whatever. They gave that to all the people they knew, with great expectations that someday they would have it ready to show. Now get to school. He ran for the door, invite in hand. Couldn't wait to see if the guys would be jealous, envious, or honor that he was going in. Johnny gloated it as he pulled out the coveted invitation. During recess, all ears were filled with all Johnny said as he showed the ticket. And that's not all. They jumped at him. What? What? They were shouting over each other. He smiled and said, I got two. He pulled the other one out as if performing a magic trick. And an even larger crowd started to form around him. People who had overheard spread the news to those just walking up, and before you knew it, the teachers focused their attention on the far end of the playground where every kid was gathered. Johnny noticed this one girl who he had always thought was so pretty, but he dared not tell her. The thought of asking her went out of his head as fast as it went in, but he did feel a little special in her eyes now. Johnny raised his voice. Attention! Whoever can be the nicest kid to all the other kids is going to get this other pass to go in with me. As corny as that sounded, the teachers nodded and smirked at each other. The kids looked at it as a challenge. Johnny held the envelope high as the bell rang, ending recess. Making it through the rest of the day at school was crazy. Everyone was passing notes to Johnny and each other. Some teachers were being extra nice, thinking they just might have a chance to get invited to go with him. There was a group. There was a group walking with Johnny on the way home that day, each of them showing how nice they could be. A couple of the boys who had seen the house up close were skeptical of whether it may be worth going in or not. Johnny explained to them, my mom had a car that looked awesome on the outside, but on the inside it was all messed up. The car wouldn't go in reverse, and it was constantly breaking down. It had all kinds of engine trouble. The oldest boy, Phil, said, exactly. It'll be worse on the inside. Johnny clarified, no, with this house it's probably the opposite. It looks terrible on the outside, but on the inside there's probably amazing things to see. You can't judge a book by its cover, good or bad. Another young boy said, either way, I'd love to go in and see what it's like on the inside, for real. The mystery, regardless of what was really inside, was enough to fuel their desires at any chance they had to get in and see for themselves. They made attempts to find out where they could get their own tickets, but failed to find any more information anywhere. After a whole week of people being on their best behavior, Johnny asked to be part of the school announcements so he could tell everyone more about what he meant regarding the pass into the toy shop. They were thrilled to hand him the microphone. Johnny was a little shy to speak into it, but his voice was even a little louder than it needed to be. Everyone hung on his words as he proclaimed, "My name is Johnny Maynard. A lot of you didn't know me a few days ago, even though I grew up in this town. Some of you have even made fun of me for years." Those guilty of that hung their heads in shame and hoped no one noticed. Well, it's time for all that to change. Not just for me. It's time for you, all of us, to treat other kids with respect and help them instead of always hurting them. It's kind of strange how we make friends sometimes according to how accomplished, talented, tough, or successful we consider them to be. We all too often get caught up, starstruck, and mesmerized by how we perceive a person's value and treat them nice just because we want to share in their accomplishments. Our accomplishments should be to treat everyone as we want to be treated. Johnny paused before making his final announcements. "I want to say one more thing. I'm giving the second invitation not to the person who treats me the nicest, but to the kid who treats everyone around them the nicest, nicer than they have in the past." The microphone clunked down as Johnny laid it on the desk in front of the regular morning announcers. Several weeks went by. Then, 3 days before the open house, Johnny was asked to announce over the PA at school who he had chosen to give the invitation to. Johnny had been watching everyone and noticed that Phil went from being the leader of a gang of kids who constantly calling names, shoving, and taunting other kids to being a really polite and helpful kid. He saw Phil carrying kids' books to class for them, learning the names of those once considered nameless, and not getting into or picking one fight. The whole school had changed. But there were a few kids who still fought, still made fun of others, and still did spiteful things like knocking the books out of poor friendless kids' hands just to laugh at them. With all this in mind, Johnny leaned into the mic, explaining why Phil would be the one going with him. Finally, the moment that had been the talk of the town came: opening day. It was a cold, rainy day in the middle of winter, and much to everyone's surprise, there were 11 business executives, adult men and women, and the 2 boys waiting in front of the dilapidated wreck of a home. The invitation read, that should be 10 business men. You'll find out why later. Anyway, the invitation read, "My home, my house is your house. You are invited to see the progress made in Toy Town. Signed, Mr. Dream." The day's weather casted a natural gloom over what was considered to be the brightest day in this little town's history. The boys stood there dripping wet, feeling out of place. Phil said, "You'd think there'd be more kids, huh?" Johnny commented, "More kids? Any kids?" The businessmen and women stood under their big, fancy umbrellas, most of them black in color. It looked more like a funeral than an exciting town event. Nick was the only other kid who stood near his 2 friends, Phil and Johnny. He smiled and said, "Have fun, guys." Johnny almost expected him to add some sarcasm to that warm wish. All their elementary school classmates, the middle school kids, and even high school members stood at a distance, shouting things like, "I hope the roof doesn't leak too bad. Tell us what's in there and what it's like in there. If you come out alive, good luck, you'll need it." Nick encouraged them. "You guys are lucky. Hey, no venture, no gain. You're adding the add to adventure. They're just jealous haters." He looks back at the other town people.